to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. This episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast is sponsored by Model 55. Model 55 provides turnkey model apartment and design solutions for senior living communities, combining quick nationwide service with deep expertise in creating model apartments. Model 55's designs are more than just aesthetically pleasing. They are strategically designed to drive occupancy and sales. From custom designs to ready-to-ship kits, Model 55 has solutions for any budget. For more information, www.model55.com. That's model55.com. I'm Julie Podewitz, CEO and founder, and today I welcome BJ Schaefbauer to the podcast. BJ, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Julie. Good to be here.
BJ is the president at Primrose Senior Living, and we have known one another, worked together for, we first met over a dozen years ago.
Yeah,
right?
2012. Yep.
Yeah, 2012. It is a dozen years now. It's 2024, soon to be 25. And I have a long-time professional relationship with Primrose. Enjoyed it through the years. Really enjoy, worked with Jesse and Brandon and the team, certainly on the sales and marketing side. You all have a unique origin story at Primrose. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure. Jim Thayers, who's our founder and current CEO, founded the company back in 1989. So this is our 35th year. It's an exciting time to be part of Primrose as much as we've grown over the years. But, humble beginnings. Jim was a CPA by trade originally and got into developing through the hotel motel industry. We're headquartered right here in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And I'm not sure many people know, but Super 8 Motels was founded right here in Aberdeen, South Dakota also. So Jim got into developing through a local Super 8 developer. And back in his CPA days in the 80s, he had done the accounting for a small independent living senior housing complex. It was a little nonprofit, and realized that, there's some opportunity here, business opportunity. And he realized that, he had 35 different grandmas and they loved him. And he learned to be a little bit passionate about taking care of them. And had this idea of, why can't I do this? Why can't I develop some of these? And so he opened the first one, little 24-unit independent living, senior living community right here in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And after about a year, it was full, and he added 12 apartments on in another wing and filled them up right away as well. And it's just, it sort of took off from there, got into assisted living as that became popular in the late 90s. Jim had also continued to develop hotels and motels. And in the early 2000s, he decided he needed to make a decision, either stick with the hotel motels or move forward with Primrose. And so he decided with Primrose, after studying the demographics and understanding the number of seniors that are coming into the market in the future. And so we focused on Primrose. And at that point, we developed, he hired some architects and developed a new design that would fit in multiple markets. And really took off in the mid 2000s and into 2010. And at that point, he had grown so much that it wasn't really a one-man show anymore. And there were some growing pains that were happening at Primrose. So at that point, that's when he decided to bring myself in as the president, and Brian Morgan, who's our CFO, and Mark McNeary, who's our chief legal counsel. Now, the four of us knew each other in the outside world. We're all from right around here. I grew up in a little town south of Aberdeen, 250 people. Brian Morgan grew up in Ipswich, it's 25 miles west of Aberdeen, and so did Jim Thayer. So Jim and Brian are married to sisters, so they're very close. And Mark McNeary, he and I went to college together here at Northern State University in Aberdeen. So we've known each other since, back in the mid to late 80s when we were going to college together. So Brian Morgan and I worked at the same CPA firm back in the middle 90s. We hired him right out of college. I'd been there about 4 years. We worked for a few years there. And just always stayed connected. I know Brian's family. One of his older brothers and my older brother were roommates in college. So there's a trust with all of us. Julie, that just goes beyond a business relationship. We've got such good connections with each other. We don't worry about what each other's doing because we do trust each other that much, and that's what's been important in the success of Primrose. You know, our just the model that we have. You know, we've got 37 communities right now in 17 different states, and 65 home office employees. We got just about 2,000 employees across the country, but the home office headquartered here in Aberdeen. It's just such close relationships. Aberdeen's 30,000 people, a little less than 30,000 people. So we know most everybody in town, and it's easy to hire people that you trust. There's a couple of guys that have worked for us for a long time that were originally teachers and coaches in a couple of the schools right here in Aberdeen. And I've found that guys like that are tremendous in business because of the relationships, the different personalities that they have to deal with as a teacher and a coach. Jim Heller, who was originally our research guy, moved into operations after I got here because I've known him for 40 years. I knew him way before Primrose, and Jim had known him and hired him already. So he was here when I got here 14 years ago. So those relationships, there was a bunch of relationships that I had in coming to Primrose, and knowing the company and the type of people that were here, it was easy to want to be here. I was a CPA in public accounting for 20 years. So I ended up the managing partner of my firm and was not planning on going anywhere. I was really happy with life. And I ran into Jim and Mark and Brian at a wedding reception of a friend of ours, the mutual friend of ours. And Jim just started talking, and he convinced me that, this might be a good move for you. And it really was. It's been great.
And that was back in 2010?
Yes, that's correct.
2010.
Yep.
And
that's
you've
when I
all,
came.
I mean, talk about trust, relationships, connections. Now, and when you've known somebody since college or, since you were kids, I think in one case, two of you knew each other since you were 10, that, I mean, you can't buy that, right? I mean, you can't recreate knowing someone from when you were 10.
Yeah.
And certainly, and from being in a relatively small town, like you said, there's such a need, because you all have such a need to find people that you really can trust. You've been leaning into teachers, coaches, which I love. I want to talk to more about that. But how do you go about, or how have you gone about with bringing that culture throughout the company? Now that you have 2,000 team members, right? 2,000, and you have 37 communities, 17 states.
Yeah, it starts with each individual, and we start with, how do we build this home office team? How do we build the team that's going to coach those individuals? And that's hiring people that you can trust, number one. And it's not always going to be people that you know, but you really have to dig in and understand who somebody is when you're hiring, in the hiring process. So we got a great HR department, but like Jim Heller, I'll go back to him. He started in HR. He was a teacher and a coach, or he started in research, and he moved into operations and ultimately was our director of operations for a time. And I didn't have to worry about things because I trusted Jim completely. I've known him for 40 years, and he was a good friend. Now it gets to be challenging, Julie, because you can have a little push and pull inside a business, and relationships can get damaged with people that are close to each other. But we've all got a mutual respect of each other that seems to work. We butt heads, and at the end of the day, we may have butted heads, but we still respect each other, and we still sometimes agree just to disagree. And you have to be willing to overlook some of those things and not let them fester. But hiring trusting people, and then they take that out. Our regional groups, we try to build regional teams. Our regional teams are made up with a regional nurse, regional sales, and regional ops, and those three work together and oversee and support anywhere from 6 to 8 communities together. And it's building those teams and building that trust in that team. And you got to try to find people that align and can get along with each other. So we've got a DISC assessment that we do to analyze people's personalities, and that helps us line up the different personalities on the teams to make it successful. But then you got to go out and find that right leader in the building. You got to find that right executive director. And a lot of times you try to find somebody that's connected to the community. Those relationships are so important. Julie, I remember back in 2012, we had you out to our leadership retreat in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we had our executive directors there and all our sales directors. And we used to do it every other year. We'd have EDs and our directors of nursing, and then the next year we'd have our EDs and our sales directors, because both those components are our departments are important. And so we try to involve them every other year. But I'll never forget something that you said to me or said to the group that it's just resonated with me since then. And that is, you know, after touring somebody through the building, whether it's a resident or their family or both, you need to look at them, just look them square in the eye and just say, do you trust me? Because that's what it boils down to. And I'll never forget that, because I think that really pushed our sales department to a point where they realized that it's very important on gaining the trust of anybody that's going to come live in our building. They're trusting us to enrich their lives. You know, that's part of our tagline. We enrich the lives of seniors. And it's so important that they trust us right out of the gate. So how do we do that? Well, you got to have good people, number one, and you got to be genuine. And we pride ourselves in finding those right people. You know, one of the hardest things to do is find that right person. And if you don't hire the right person, at what point do you have to make a change? You know, those things are hard to do, but you have to be able to assess that situation or assess that individual. And if they're not the right person, they're probably not happy in their job, and we're not going to get the performance that we expect. But the culture starts with each individual. And, you know, we try to foster that culture with our regionals. You know, there's regular visits to the building, and it's interacting with them and earning the trust first of the executive director with that regional team. And then onward with our regional sales lining up with that sales director, and our regional nurses lining up with that director of nursing. And they have to trust. You know, the most important people in our organization, Julie, you know this, is the frontliners, the housekeepers, the CNAs, the med aides. That's the face of Primrose. That's, to me, the most important people in our organization. You know, my title's the president, and I tell my people this. That only defines what I do. That is not a level of importance. And we have that kind of respect for our people. And that's what I think really grows our culture and fosters our culture very well, is the fact that we're very approachable. We're just real guys. We're real people. We're very genuine. I mean, none of us walk around like we're more important than anybody else, because I don't believe that I am. I mean, I'm a human like everybody else. I have a job to do, and I do my job, but it doesn't make me more important. You know, I also tell our people, your life outside of Primrose is way more important than your life inside of Primrose. And when you provide that kind of respect to somebody, when, you know, they got a kid to deal with that's sick or something, don't come ask for permission. Go take care of your kid, because that's far more important than what you got going on here. And with that kind of flexibility comes trust. And as long as they're not abusing it, and nobody does, when you trust them, they don't abuse it.
Well, trust is, trust works both ways, and it's like a couple of things I'm taking away is how, I mean, that number, and also high confidence. I tell my team, high confidence, low ego, right? You're confident, right?
Yeah.
We're very confident in what we're doing, but low ego. Like you're right. It's not who's important. The most important, really, like you said, frontline, absolutely customer facing, resident facing. And, your title, again, it defines your deliverables, right? What you're responsible for. But that trust, it's like you can't see it, but you feel it. And I mean, you can see it in action, but man, when it's there, it's almost like in any relationship, right? When something's going really well, or you're very confident and you trust someone 100%, it's all like a trust fall, which I don't know. It's probably me. I can't do that. Have you ever tried to do that, falling back in a group? But that someone's got you, and it's almost like you take it for granted in a sense. But when you don't have it, it is the number one it's the hugest gap in your life. Yeah. And especially of what we do. So it sounds to me like, it sounds to me like that you live it. You don't just say it. You also have, I know you have challenges at Primrose, just like,
Yeah.
other senior living operators, but you do have high retention.
Yeah.
In a, higher retention than average, certainly. And from a sales perspective, which is, I know the most of around, it's much higher. So
Yeah.
that's got to have something to do with it.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I think people find the ones that come here and are truly the right people. They realize how good this culture is and how nice it is to be here. We've had a number of people that have left. We just rehired a regional ops manager that had left, 3, 4 years ago and just wanted to come back. And we had an opening, and he's always been real good. So it's like, why not? I mean, he got it. I mean, I think he got it before he left, but needed and wanted to try something different. So I
Sure.
think once you get the right people and they settle in here, they realize that, hey, this is a good place to be. And I want people to want to come here. I want them to want to come to work. There's got to be a little fun involved. We do a lot of fun activities. Last week we had all our remote regionals back to the home office, and we got nice facilities here to be able to have them all back and do some educational things, but we do some fun things too. So we did our, since they were all back and in person, we did our little, call it a Christmas party, but it's in October. So we give away some really nice gifts to everybody. And then we brought in a little live local band, and we had an 80s theme, and we did a bunch of 80s music, and you just feel like a family. And that's really the way we've treated it. And the four of us principals are all from small towns, and we're like family. So if you treat them like that, they're going to feel like that, and that just builds the trust. We grew our occupancy. We had a big push on occupancy. We started to dip a little bit, through COVID, and call it the COVID hangover or whatever. So back in May, Jim Thayers, our CEO, stood up in front of everybody, and we just had a little talk. It's like, hey, you know what? It's all hands on deck. It's all hands on deck right now. By the end of August, we want our average occupancy to be at 90%. We got to 88.9, I think, something close, but we grew average occupancy by, I think it was 3.2 or 3.4 percentage points in that period of time. And our push now is to get to 92% by the end of December. And we've been there before. We got a number of communities. I think we got like 22 now that are above 92%, out of the 37. And part of Jim's challenge to everybody was, hey, you know what? We have the right people here. We trust that you guys can get this done. And it resonated with everybody. And everybody just jumped on board, and we pushed. And it was fun. It was a challenge. And I think, there's a little bit of stressful moments from time to time, but they knew we got their back, and we didn't need to make any changes throughout. We just pushed. And I think everybody really felt connected as a team, because it was a challenge that we're all taking on. We all needed to do our part from whatever department anybody was in. They just pushed, and they helped out, and they supported ops, they supported sales especially, and it worked. So it's just fun. I mean, I love coming to work every day. It's
I
just,
can tell. I can tell you
Yeah,
have such a passion, and that
yeah,
those are things that you can't teach, and you
yeah,
just have it or not. And to have a passion for what you do after X number of amount of time, especially,
yeah.
is a gift. Really, it's a gift. And
Mhm,
it sounds like really, Primrose, it's like the trust is sort of the umbrella under
mhm.
which everything else falls for Primrose. For those people listening, you mentioned a couple things, and being from a small town, right? And there are many people that aren't from a small town, and there's
Sure.
loads of people from large towns that are, great, trusting, a lot of people and things. And you said you use disc assessment. What are some, like, if you were to give advice or things that have worked for you all, like kind of practical ways to, and it's always a risk, a chance when you hire someone new. You don't know if you can trust a new friend that you've made until time goes, right? So how do you kind of, it said your gut, right? Your gut instinct, but what are some of the
Mhm.
things that you all maybe even subconsciously or whatever do, but like literally do say, hey, let's this is a real important component.
So I think it goes to the hiring process. We've got a guy like Jim Heller now, who I talked about, teacher and a coach, just great character. I mean, this guy's just solid. I've known him forever. And he does our recruiting. I mean, he's out there on LinkedIn, he's out there on Indeed, he's out there doing this, and he's looking at and his history with operations, he knows and understands what he's looking for. But then he tries to connect with these people and find out who they are. I don't care what their resume looks like. I want to know what's their character. What can you trust them? That's the first thing. And I think you got to ask them certain questions. For example, I mean, can you describe a time when you made a difficult decision? If you had to make a difficult decision that involved a conflict between, say, your personal ethics and company policy, how did they answer that question? That's an interesting question. And when you put somebody on the spot like that, you can almost tell instantly what kind of person they are.
That's a good question. So
I mean,
you're
those are,
personally, maybe like during the interview process,
yeah,
pose a situation, personal ethics,
yes.
company policy,
Mhm.
okay, that's an
Yep.
interesting, yeah.
So another example of a question is like, have you ever been in a situation where you made a mistake and how did you handle it? Did you try to cover it up or were you honest about it? Because we all make mistakes and we know that. Um, and how are they going to answer that? Everybody's going to put on a face, but you can usually tell based on how they start the conversation or how they start their answer, whether or not you can trust them. It's just little questions like that. And I learned to ask those questions when I was hiring people at the accounting firm back in, the 20 years that I spent in public accounting. Because you got to have people you can trust. You got to have people that your clients can trust. I think back to the CPA days, and my clients trusted me with a lot of big decisions. My firm at the time, we did more farm and ranch related tax and accounting work and estate planning than any other firm in the state of South Dakota. And so we kind of had a lock on the big farmers, and they had to trust us because it's big decisions, it's big. And so you had to have people that you could trust. So we tried to hire people we could trust. First of all,
Yeah,
if you know them, but I
yeah.
had great partners at the time. I got great partners here. So, and I think some of that's South Dakota. I mean, there's just a lot of good people here. It's mostly small town. I mean, our population of our state's barely 800,000. We're in Aberdeen, 30,000 people, and we're the third largest city in the state. So it's like, everybody. But
Which is, I'm sure it could, a blessing and a curse in some sense, like, it's in a silly little way. And I don't know everyone in my town, but it's like when I go, and I'm sure you don't, but if I go grocery shopping or I'm just like, in my sweats or something, I
yep.
hope I don't see anyone I know, or if I just run in from exercise class,
Yeah,
then
right.
that way, not so good. But in generally speaking, it's wonderful to know your neighbor. And especially in, well, always, but especially in our kind of a world today where we're not as necessarily connected in that sense. Uh, Kind of go to work, come home, garage door goes down, and you're just on social media a lot. And it's
Mhm.
wonderful that, to build your network and when you have that in the forefront, that meaning right people, the
Yeah,
right people we can trust, and
yeah,
that's your priority. It makes sense that when you're leading with that, you're going to get what you put out in this, you really want that, you're going to get that. And like you said, if it's and this happens with if it's not the right fit, or there's a misstep, people will exit on their own, or it's soon sort of uncovered.
yeah.
It's obviously working for you guys, and you mentioned that occupancy push. I love hearing that. I love hearing your goal of 92% plus across the portfolio by the end of the year. I know you guys will hit it. What's next for Primrose?
Well, we'd like to get back to developing. We've turned off our any new builds just because of the economy, the inflation and interest rates. It's just a tough go right now. So we're focusing on, making sure operations are pretty streamlined. So we were able to focus on occupancy this year, frankly, because we're not building right now. But we do own land in a couple of markets that we'd be ready to move on. So we're actually meeting with an architect here in a couple of weeks to do a kind of a redesign of one of our models, our ALIL model that we're excited about. We just love that building and we want to get back to building it. Um, So I'm hoping by next summer, we got to see what happens with interest rates, especially between now and probably May or June next year, but we want to get back to it. We want to keep growing. We've done a couple of acquisitions in the last year and a half in particular markets that make sense to us. So we keep a pulse on anything that comes to market that would spark our interest. It's got to be the right fit for us. We're pretty particular, especially about the markets that we're in. So we continue to, we still got our director of research is still working hard on looking at markets and just trying to find the right fit for us. And I think we got anywhere from 25 to 30 markets that are at various stages of research where some of them we could move in fairly quickly if we get back to it. So we want to keep growing. We're not interested in slowing down at this point, but it's been a tough go because we like to be developing. That's what we do. The vast majority of our properties we've developed ourselves. Just a handful of acquisitions that we've done over the years. And so we want to grow in whatever way we can.
And you will continue to be successful, and it's wonderful to have great people like yourself, obviously all your partners, everyone at Primrose, such a positive influence to everyone that you come in contact with, but a wonderful positive force in senior living. BJ and leading president and leading team Primrose Senior Living out of beautiful Aberdeen, South Dakota. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Grow Your Occupancy podcast.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Julie. You've done a lot of work with us over the year. I know Jesse just loves working with you, and I appreciate everything you've done for our company. We've used you in a number of different ways, starting with speaking at that retreat 12 years ago. So I sure appreciate what you've done for us.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's always my honor, my pleasure, and I'll continue to be your biggest fan. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Primrose, certainly you can find them on primroseseniorliving.com and growyouroccupancy.com. Thank you, Model 55, for being the sponsor of this quarter's podcast. And a super exciting piece of news from my end is the Senior Living Sales Workbook is just now newly published and available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we will talk to you very soon. This episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast is sponsored by Model 55. Model 55 provides turnkey model apartment and design solutions for senior living communities. Combining quick nationwide service with deep expertise in creating model apartments, Model 55's designs are more than just aesthetically pleasing. They are strategically designed to drive occupancy and sales. From custom designs to ready-to-ship kits, Model 55 has solutions for any budget. For more information, www.model55.com. That's model55.com.